Hey guys, still here and welcome back to ICBM. In this video I want to have a quick look at how to counter submarines. What do you do when your opponent goes submarine heavy? The game that you're looking at is the French versus Spanish map. I was playing as the Spanish, which means I get a large portion of South America. The French get a large portion of Africa, and of course we get our sort of home turf of Paris. Well, not so much Brussels, but I suppose that this is a scenario that built on what happens when these guys would have stuck with their territories and not given them up, and eventually ended up in the nuclear territory, or the nuclear era. Now, my tactic for this one is to go without any kind of land assets, or at least as few as possible. So what I did was go submarine heavy, and we started out with, 1,500 starting points, or near enough. Which means that I was able to get a lot of submarine research out very quickly. I started out with a ton of submarine techs, and that means that, and you can't properly see it here, this submarine has all the silent drive upgrades. That makes them exceptionally hard to see. And that was going to be an early advantage. Now, this is not going to be possible in all the games that you'll be playing, or in all the games that you're trying to be countering submarines. In this case, it did work, and if you have an opponent that just techs up into the submarine tech or into the silent engines tech, it's tricky to find these things. It is tricky. The first thing that I always try to ask myself when I'm facing an opponent is, if he is strong in this area, where's he weak? What's he not doing? In my case, I don't really have anything beside 2 submarines and 2 satellites. And you can... I'm not sure... Yeah, there's a satellite just about to cross into the African continent. Aside from those assets, I have nothing. Which means that the first way to counter submarines is to immediately start striking cities. Because by doing that, you're reducing my GDP. And by reducing my GDP, you're making sure that I don't really have an option or a chance to catch up. And that I cannot really be striking your territories. So that is the first thing. Make sure that you find out where the enemy is not. Where's the enemy weak? In my case, since I didn't really have any kind of land-based assets other than 1 radar site, all my information about the enemy movements had to come from satellites. So this is something else that makes a satellite killing capability very potent. You need to make sure that the enemy does not have information. In this case, I was very fortunate that Kita spawned in his carrier strike group with 2 destroyers right next to Montreal. And my satellite, because it flew over on a pattern that happened to cover both Africa and Montreal, immediately spotted it. So I decided to send my submarines over there. And what happens is that Kita goes for a bit of a nuclear strike, he hits Mexico a little bit, he gains a few points, but the damage to my territory is relatively minor. GDP drops to 96%. Now this is where the battle gets interesting, because this is where my submarines are about to converge on his carrier battle group. And his destroyers are unupgraded, aside for the cruise missile tech, which in this case is not really going to help him, because the cruise missiles are only effective against surface targets. My submarines are very much not on the surface. Now, unfortunately the game in the replay mode that I'm currently using doesn't have a feature where I can show you what each party can see. But what happened is that for him, it seemed like these torpedoes were coming out of nowhere. The destroyers were not capable of spotting the submarines because the submarines had a lot of sonar buffs. In the sense that they had technology that made them very difficult to detect. So my first order of business is to wipe out 1 destroyer, killing off the carrier next, and then wiping out the other destroyer. If something like this happens, and you find yourself facing a couple of submarines that are virtually impossible to find, don't send your carrier group into the force where you're possibly finding the submarines. Now, in my case, the submarines had improved engines, so they were always going to catch them, but he did see that the torpedoes were coming in from the west, so he's maneuvering away, but not fast enough. Anyway, a carrier can be a very valuable asset in the fight against submarines, but you need AWACS tech. What you can do with a submarine, or at least with a carrier against a submarine, is make sure that you have the helicopter, the scouting helicopter. It does come with 6 depth charges, but more importantly, it comes with a very good sonar array, and a sonar array that, since it's mounted on a helicopter, can move quickly. So in this case, had he had AWACS tech, or had he started researching AWACS tech, he could have just sent his helicopter back and forth over this territory a bit, and probably spotted these submarines very quickly. And then, since it is a helicopter with depth charges, all I was able to do was either force the submarines into a fight with the carrier, hoping to kill it, or withdraw, in which case I would probably be taking depth charges. So, an aircraft carrier can be an asset against submarines, provided that it has the right tech. Aside from that, what can you do against an opponent that's using a lot of submarines? Currently, as you can see, he has all the assets. He has radars, which really aren't doing him any favors because he can't see me, since I'm underneath the waves. He does have airports, 2 of them, and he has B-1B Lancers, so he has already upgraded his aircraft. If the enemy is going for a submarine heavy strategy, I would probably be building a couple more nukes, even if they're the small ones, and just reduce the GDP. Just make sure that you knock out the GDP a bit. And by doing that, you're making it more difficult for me to catch up. Both in technology and in production. Even if it's only a 10% debuff, you're going to feel that in the long run. Currently, I still have a GDP of 96%. If he does decide to strike with a couple of aircraft, and he already did, Mexico City just lost a bit of population a couple of minutes ago, he was able to reduce my GDP. I cannot do anything against his bombers. I could surface a submarine, but then again, it would just be a very dead submarine pretty quick, because I don't really have any way to deal with an aircraft whatsoever. It's not like these things come with surface-to-air missiles. What I do next is try to get SSBNs out very, very quickly. I don't have an airport. I don't have an airfield. So without an air force, without an airfield, I cannot really do anything in case he goes on the offensive. I don't have any kind of weapon system to counter these. I don't even have SAMs researched. That is something that currently Kita can use. I am defenseless against this aircraft. What I am trying to do is use my cruise missiles on the submarines to blind him further and also cause a bit of panic. To show that I am, well, I'm not everywhere, but I'm pretending to be in multiple different locations by having the submarine here engage a destroyer that just gets spawned in. This time the destroyer does spot me and returns fire, but not before I kill it, and that was a sudden death. I'm also prepping to do the same thing with the submarine over here in West Africa. All the while I'm a bit harassing, and I'm pretending to have a lot of forces, which really isn't true. I only have 2 subs. And in this time, I'm rushing an SSBN. The SSBN is going to be my weapon, which, especially on this map, is very valuable. Because with an SSBN, if I park it somewhere in the somewhere in the Atlantic, I can hit both of the airfields. And that is what I follow, or that's what I do eventually. Now, there we go. I take out the base over there, and I think that I was on surface too long. The destroyer spotted me and took me out with a cruise missile. But again, I'm just pretending to be everywhere, and all the while I'm keeping track of all of his assets by using my satellites. Still, I have no defenses. This is his moment to strike. This is his opportunity to do damage against me. And on this map in particular, make sure you go for Mexico City, make sure you go for Buenos Aires. These are by far the most valuable cities. I think the third is going to be Santiago at 4.84. Lima, 11.02. Bogota, 10.24. Make sure you hit the large population centers. If you don't feel like manually figuring out what those large population centers are, just use a strike plan. Set up a strike plan, tell your bombers to go after cities, and the AI will figure out which cities to pick. Now, I was discussing with Kita during this game, because it was a bit of a trial match, a bit of a trial and error, seeing what works against what he could do. And I said, you know what, you can set up destroyer picket lines. You can set up destroyer patrol lines. That works. But your destroyers have to be on par with the submarines. An alternative is to go for a submarine on patrol. But then again, you would have to invest the same level of tech into the submarines. In my case, if I were to be facing a lot of submarines, I probably wouldn't do that. I would probably try to assert my air dominance even more. Potentially researching the 10 megaton bomb and getting rid of a couple of large cities. Again, reducing GDP, because I'm lagging 4% behind him in GDP. It's not that bad. But still, if he decides to go for some seriously large firepower, I don't have any kind of way to counter it. Now, I believe that around this time, it took me about 30 minutes to research the SSBN tech. I was getting ready to deploy my first SSBN. There it is. There's the first SSBN. It's the only nuclear asset that I have. And I am using this one to immediately wipe out the airfield in Canada and making sure that this part of my territory is now safe. The submarine over here, I just spawned it in, surfaces, takes out the radar site over there, and dives again. There was this little territory, and this is not really part of how to counter submarines, but more pay attention to this little bit when you are fighting on this map. He can spawn in assets over here. This is going to be critical, because this part allows him to spawn in destroyers, airfields, submarines, whatever he needs to counter my submarine threat. Now my SSBN is moving east, allowing itself to get into range of the other airfield. And then I take that out, because I know that an airfield is expensive. An airfield, if you have 100% GDP and 50% production, takes you about 12 minutes. And by doing this, by taking out the airfield over here in Canada and over there, I make sure that he doesn't really have anything to counter my cities with. So this is buying me some time to get more strike assets in. At this point, he has no airfields. They're not really that critical in their fight, or in his fight against my submarines, because they simply won't do much. Again, AWACS tech. The AWACS bird from an airfield is not really that valuable, but an AWACS bird, a helicopter from a carrier group, all the more important. You really want to have that tech, because that, I believe it's an E2. Oh, sorry, no, that's the E2 Sentry. Anyway, the AWACS helicopter, that is critical. You need to be able to very quickly scout out larger portions of the ocean and find the submarines. In this case, the SSBN that I just used to sink 2 of his destroyers, which were not on patrol. If you are facing somebody who has more information than you and who has long-range strike capability of an SSBN, keep these things moving. Even if they were only moving between Abidjan and Lagos, just patrolling back and forth, they would have been a much more difficult target for my boomer. I just gave my position away from here, and I should now be getting a submarine response, or a destroyer response, or anything like that, from him. But because I wiped out his destroyers, I'm not actually getting one. So I'm just sailing around on the surface, firing off a missile, and pulling back. Now, the SSBNs and their weapon capabilities, they're very good, at least early on, against more stationary targets like radar sites, airfields, and such. Especially early game when people don't have advanced ballistic missile defense yet. It's very potent to deal with a couple of these assets. Now, in this case, I was not really too serious about going for the kills. I didn't really think that killing off cities was going to work too well. So instead, I just decide to mess with him a little bit psychologically and take out a couple of radar sites, some SAM sites. All the while, these things don't really benefit me. Killing off a radar site really doesn't benefit me because I don't have anything that can be detected by the radar site anyway. So this is just more of a psychological bit. And again, you can use that if you're playing submarines against the other player. At this point, he probably knows that I still don't have anything. Or at least he could suspect so, because his radar site over here isn't picking up anything, and well, he's not really getting any scouting effort in. I mean, in the replay feature I can see what he has, and vice versa, and I'm not seeing any kind of satellites on his part. I did give away that I'm using satellites, and that's my only way of figuring out where these targets are. If I didn't have satellites, all I could target was the cities, which at that point with the SSBN I would probably do, up until the point where I had satellites, and then I would go for the airfields. So again, making sure that the enemy who's using a lot of submarines gets blinded, that's critical. You need to make sure he does not have any targets. Second, AWACS tech. I'm once again going to hammer this home. You need AWACS tech. You need that helicopter with a sonar. And ideally, destroyer picket lines. But keep in mind that those can be expensive. A destroyer takes on average about 2 minutes to build. If you give it a bit of engine tech, it's going to speed up significantly. But you don't really want to pump out 15, 20 destroyers. Because at some point, you're going to find that you've just wasted 40, 50, 60 minutes worth of game time just building destroyers. It's really not that valuable. It's really not going to give you that many points. Whereas the alternative, having your destroyer spawn in here, at least in this map, and just patrolling the waters around my coastline, and there really aren't that many. You could just be patrolling here from Ciudad to Maracaibo to Managua, Santo Domingo, Santiago, and Havana. Patrolling these areas make it so that I don't have the capability of spawning in subs without them getting detected early. So it's not like you have to have large picket patrol lines over here, but having a couple of destroyers very much secure my waters on this part means that it's impossible for me to spawn in submarines. The alternative option that I still have left on this map is spawning in submarines in Buenos Aires. And again, it's not a large portion of naval area that I have to spawn in ships. But had he parked 2, 3, 4 destroyers here, that would have been enough. So if you don't feel like buying 20 destroyers, buy 5 or 6. And have these things just patrol the waters here. Just one sub there, one there, maybe 1 or 2 there if you're feeling like Havana and Santo Domingo are going to be a threat. And then have a few here. If he'd done that, I would have had the west coast of South America to spawn in submarines. But that would take me a lot of time, because I would have to sail all the way around South America and then make my way towards Africa, which is where his larger cities are. So deny the enemy the capability of spawning in more submarines while you use a small force to hunt down the existing submarines. Now, that's my little run through about how to deal with submarines. 1, figure out where the enemy is not, where the enemy is weak. I was using submarines. That means I don't have any kind of defensive tech. I don't have any kind of city defense. Use that. 2, AWACS. Make sure you have that helicopter with the sonar array that can quickly scout out larger stretches of terrain. And 3, deny the enemy the capability of spawning in more subs. On this map, that is fairly doable. On other maps, like for example the standard 7 versus 7 or the 7 continents, it's not that possible. If you're fighting, let's say you're fighting from Europe against the continental northern US or North America, good luck trying to nail down the whole territory. It's not impossible, but you're going to need a lot of ships to do that. Anyway, those are my tips. If you have any more, let me know down below in the comment section. I look forward to seeing what you guys have come up with in your fight against submarines. And let me know what you have in mind for another video. If you have any ideas for another thing or another video that I could be recording to help you get better at the game, let me know. I'm by no means an expert, but some things that I feel that I have figured out enough to at least make a video on. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you soon for the next one.